Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here today. The goal of this talk is to discuss innovations and challenges in developing medical devices. As you know, over the past decade or so, the trends of communication systems have significantly changed. With the growth of connected devices, today majority of communication systems are connecting machines to machines. It is estimated that by 2025, there will be 50 to 75 billion connected devices. When the internet was created, the goal was to connect multiple host machines together. However, today, the new trend in technology is providing connectivity not only at any time, in any place, but also with any device. The Internet of Things is really enhancing the machine to machine technology with a vision that we should be able to connect any device to the Internet through the use of the standard communication protocols. Therefore, the goal is to be able to offer new services without human interactions, provide scalability, and connect thousands of devices to one another, and at the same time ensure self-configurability and programmability for each device in the network. Over the last decade, the IoT has become one of the most prominent trends of the technology. Today, IoT technology is penetrating in every industry, including transportation, utilities, smart cities, agriculture, environment, industrial, and of course, healthcare. IoT is becoming increasingly popular in many different fields, including automotive industry, nanoscale device production, and healthcare. Today, we have Internet of Everything. For example, we have Internet of Vehicles or IOV, Internet of Nano Things, Internet of Medical Things. The focus of this talk is on medical IoT, also known as Internet of Medical Things or IoMT. So what is the difference between IoMT and eHealth? eHealth is the network of ICT or information communication technology devices operated by the humans for human healthcare and wellness. On the other hand, Internet of Medical Things is the network of the smart devices operated by the devices, not humans, for human healthcare and wellness. Clearly, the ongoing pandemic has accelerated the adaptation of tech-driven healthcare transformation. The United States IoMT market size is expected to continue growing. The market includes system and software, medical services, and medical devices. In fact, a third of the existing IoMT market is dedicated to medical devices alone. The growth of the Internet of Medical Things market is not limited to the United States. In fact, globally, this market has been soaring in Europe, Asia, South America, the Middle East, and Africa. It is estimated that the global IoMT will reach $142 billion by the year 2026. So, who are the key players in the IoMT market? The major companies operating in IoMT market are General Electric, Philips, Medtronic, Cisco, IBM, Siemens, Johnson & Johnson, and more. But majority of these players are involved in competitive strategic development to gain leadership position in the global market. They're more interested in developing new healthcare-focused cybersecurity platform and inventory management systems. They're also extremely interested in establishing partnership with startups to develop new and innovative services. IoMT is a competitive market. It's a market with stringent requirements and specifications that demand for more complex product design with integrated solutions, requires device compliance. It deals with many challenging government approval process, and it also needs stringent technical specifications, including security to ensure data privacy for clients, power to ensure long-lasting product, reliability to make sure the data is reliable, and safety to make sure no harm occurs while the device is being used. And all of these are coupled with the increasing cost of manufacturing and shortage of parts. This figure shows the layered architecture of the IoMT. It consists of 5 layers, including device layer, network layer, middleware layer, application, and business layer. These layers are respectively in charge of data gathering, data transmission, process information, applications, and system management. When it comes to the perception or device layer in IoMT, we can categorize the medical sensors into clinical and non-clinical. Clinical sensors include wearable sensors and implantable sensors. Non-clinical sensors include asset tracking sensors and location-based sensors. In 2019, the market size for wearable sensors was estimated to be $10.6 billion. A year later, in 2020, the market size for implantable sensors was estimated to be over $8 billion. The increasing demand for medical devices is predicted to bring lucrative opportunities in the near future. As you know, typical clinical sensors include heart rate, blood oxygen, EEG, respiration, and more. Examples of implantable sensors include neural and cochlear implants. When it comes to the network technology for IoMT, there are many different technologies that can be considered. The choice of the wireless technology generally depends on various parameters, including bandwidth support, latency, medium depending on the location of the device, feasibility, existing infrastructure, connectivity, lifetime, reliability, and more. This diagram shows a general, perhaps simplified pathway for medical device development. Generally, the production of any medical device, it starts with discovery and ideation phase. Then we develop a prototype and we validate the design. All of these are very common phases for developing any product. But when it comes to the medical devices, the challenging phases start after we have a prototype. In order to enter the market, a company needs to present clinical trials for the medical device, which are very costly and can be tedious. Prior to such trials, it's critical to make sure the product is safe to use. Before we start manufacturing in the United States, we need to make sure we have followed the rules and standards set by the Food and Drug Administration, also known as FDA. So it's really this entire process that makes developing medical devices relatively long and costly. The Center for Devices and the Radiological Health, also known as CDRH, is responsible for pre-market approval of all medical devices, as well as overseeing the manufacturing, performance, and safety of the new medical products. Many of the regulatory rules pertaining medical devices depend on how a medical device has been categorized. Classification of medical devices depend on how invasive and risky the devices are. For example, implants belong to class 3, whereas ventilators belong to class 2 medical devices. For example, consider also the Apple Watch. In 2018, Apple launched an upgrade to turn its watch into a personal electrocardiogram (ECG). The FDA considered this app to be a moderate risk device and thus classified it as software as a medical device, which is a class 2 device. Medical classification is according to Section 201 of the U.S. Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which is also known as FDCA. Title 21 of the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations regulates many aspects of product development and manufacturing for medical devices. These regulations range from choosing the right parts all the way to the calibration process and how to manage the data collected from the patients. There are many regulatory paths for medical device technologies. For example, we talked about how medical devices are classified by FDA. However, during COVID-19 pandemic, 2 new regulatory pathways have become available for certain medical devices. One of them, which I'm sure you have heard of, is called EUA, or Emergency User Authorization. An emergency user authorization is a mechanism to facilitate the availability and use of medical countermeasures, including vaccines and certain medical devices, during public health emergencies, such as the current COVID-19 pandemic. So what is HIPAA? HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. The HIPAA Act is a federal law that requires the creation of national standards in order to protect sensitive patient health information. HIPAA basically safeguards against cyber attacks. This is particularly important when we consider that in 2020, data breaches affected 26 million records in the United States alone, which cost the healthcare industry over $13 billion. HIPAA covers many individuals and institutions, including physicians, nurses, hospitals, dentists, etc. It also covers informations which should be protected by companies and individuals regarding the patient, such as the name of the patient, address, telephone, social security, email, biometric identifiers, and more. HIPAA, it turns out, that doesn't really define any particular requirement for medical devices. However, generally speaking, it's highly suggested that in order to be HIPAA compliant, it's important that certain rules are considered. For example, the device must ensure that protected health information of the patient. The data transmission, in case the device is capable of doing so, must conceal patient names while providing relevant information such as patient health history and room numbers to ensure privacy and availability. The medical device must also incorporate advanced privacy measures such as biometric identification through fingerprints for critical data. So let me switch here and talk a little about medical device that we have been involved in. We started Title Medical in January of 2021. Our first product was NC. NC is a smart monitoring system that attaches to the existing incentive spirometers to quantitatively track patient usage. But what was the motivation for developing NC? Well, hospital readmission is one of the costliest problems in United States healthcare system. One of the most common reasons of readmission is pneumonia. Hospitals in the United States are responsible for readmission costs that occur within 30 days of discharge. That means if a patient returns within that 30 days, the hospital is responsible to accept all the charges. Each year, there are more than 140,000 cases of pneumonia-related readmissions in the United States. Average cost of each readmission is about $20,000. Readmission costs United States healthcare system over $10 billion annually. So how can we reduce the readmission rate? Well, a common and simple equipment to prevent pneumonia is incentive spirometer. It's basically a disposable breathing exercise device used by patients in hospitals to maintain lung capacity. 20% of hospital patients end up using incentive spirometers. The problem, though, is that there is no way to quantitatively track patient usage of incentive spirometers. I hope none of you have ever used incentive spirometers. But in case you have seen one, it looks something like what's shown in this slide. The doctor sets a volume target for the patient on the incentive spirometer. The patient blows in it and a piston rises with each deep breath. The patient is the only one that can see the tidal volume. NC is an inexpensive, reusable attachment to the existing incentive spirometer. The purpose of NC is to verify proper use of incentive spirometer and make sure the patient complies. The picture here shows how NC can be attached to the existing incentive spirometer and monitor breathing. The NC can also remind the patient to use the incentive spirometer in appropriate time intervals. We are very excited that we recently received an emergency use authorization from FDA for NC. Receiving an EUA effectively signifies that EUA has approved that the product is safe, it's effective, and it can be used for patients with COVID-19. It also says that the product can accurately measure, and it's a novel solution to monitor patients' respiratory conditions. We're now moving on to the manufacturing phase and completing our clinical testing of NC. I would like to stop at this point. Here are some additional references in case you're interested to learn more about NC and what we are doing. If you're interested, we'd love to talk to you, and here is my contact information. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.